across the country and also hear from those left disappointed by the decision. But first, let's get to the court and our justice correspondent, Pete Williams. Pete, set the scene for us.
Lester, good evening. It's the most important gay rights ruling ever, and it's the culmination of decades of legal battles. It comes from a Supreme Court that just 30 years ago said gay people could be punished as criminals.
A huge cheer, then singing as the decision reaches the crowd out front. The historic ruling struck down the bans on same-sex marriage still in effect in 14 states, all of them in the South and the Midwest. It was already legal everywhere else.
June 26, 2015 was a very important day in the course of American history. But let's go back to where it all began in 2013. Two men, James Obergefell and John Arthur James, were denied the right to have their same-sex marriage recognized on their death certificates. This was important because John Arthur was diagnosed with ALS and only had a few months to live. Under the Ohio Constitution, the state could refuse to recognize their marriage. Although this is true, it is worth noting that the two had gotten married in Maryland, where same-sex marriage was legal. The two were from Ohio and wished to have John buried there when he died.
The battle officially began on July 19, 2013. James Obergefell filed the case in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Ohio. The original defendants were Governor John Kasich, Attorney General Mike DeWine, and Registrar of the City of Cincinnati Health Department Dr. Camille Jones. Obergefell won the case, as a judge ruled that the state recognized the marriage through a temporary restraining order. Although this was a victory, the plaintiffs were not satisfied. James Obergefell joined David Michener and Robert Grun. The judge again held that the state must recognize same-sex marriage on death certificates. The case was appealed to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, where it was ruled that the bans on same-sex marriage were constitutional. On November 14, 2014, Obergefell filed a petition for a writ of certiorari with the U.S. Supreme Court. The court agreed to hear the case and consolidated the case with multiple Sixth Circuit cases. Obergefell v. Hodges challenged two key ideas found in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution: whether the Due Process Clause requires a state to license marriage between homosexual couples, and whether the 14th Amendment requires a state to recognize a homosexual couple's marriage when the marriage was lawfully performed out of the current state. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that the Due Process Clause protects fundamental liberties that include the right to marry, whether a couple is same-sex or not. The court also found that the Equal Protection Clause protects same-sex couples and provides them equal protection of the law. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Clarence Thomas and Scalia wrote the dissenting opinions, stating that the Constitution does not address the issue of recognizing same-sex unions. They also stated that the court overstepped its power and that this issue should be addressed in state legislators, not by the court. Justice Thomas was interviewed in an exclusive.
So, Justice Thomas, people know you are a rather quiet but respected Supreme Court judge. Could you explain the thought process between the four dissenting judges in this Obergefell versus Hodges case?
Well, Philip, the opinion of the dissenting judge was quite simple. We as a court are part of the judicial branch. We are not the legislature.
But one can say that the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment protects the rights of all citizens, and specifically the right to marry. What do you say to those people? Because one can say that the court needs to protect the rights of the people.
I quite understand that, Philip, but you see, there is a very fine line in those situations, and when the court starts to overstep its bounds, then we might accidentally set precedents that could be disastrous in the future. Overall, I would say the Constitution does indeed address the right to marry, but it does not mention what the definition of marriage is. Does marriage include same-sex couples? I believe that's up to the states.
But if you're interpreting that, aren't you merely interpreting the Constitution? Is that not the court's job? Is that not a part of the legislature?
Yes, we have indeed interpreted what the 14th Amendment means to the people of the United States, but our majority decision will force legislatures to create a new standard. It essentially adds to the Constitution, which the framers did not want to make as easy as this. Thus, the Supreme Court does not hold the job of forcing legislatures to adopt a new idea that we as a group have created.
I see. Thank you, Justice Thomas, for your time.
No problem.
This definition has been with us for millennia. And it's very difficult for the court to say, oh, well, we know better.
My question is, you're not seeking to join the institution, you're seeking to change what the institution is. A fundamental core of the institution is the opposite sex relationship, and you want to introduce into it a same-sex relationship.